Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to welcome you to one more fabulous event. As far as I remember, that's the first time it's been held in St. Petersburg, though I might be wrong. Our plenary session is devoted to building an international financial center in Russia. And I guess the topic should be approached at a different angle today. Those who've been in the market for a long time remember that after 2008, a number of initiatives were launched to build an international financial center in Russia. There were several strategies, such as the concept of an ideal securities market prepared by now for National Association of Securities Market Participants up to 2020. It's interesting to look at it now because something was implemented but something looks dramatic. Then there was a report by the Forum Analytical Center on building IFC 1.1, and then there was the concept of building IFC 2.0. So the topic was not invented by Sergey, and moreover we have several international deals in the market when foreign companies, not only those companies doing business in Russia, but real foreign companies for the Russian market, attracted capital in the Russian market. If we look down upon at what an international financial center is, that it will look like that. We need a regulatory framework first, allowing investors to invest efficiently, allowing companies to raise capital for business development efficiently. And when the number of investors and the amount of money in the market is big enough and the regulatory framework facilitates market development, then this market will be attractive for investors, not only Russian investors, but foreign investors. And that's how I want to have this session today. Our fabulous speakers have prepared presentations. Almost all of them do have presentations. They will show us the scale and they will set the topics. And by the end of this panel, I want us to have answered the questions like that. How we built an international financial center in Russia, and what should be done to have it built and have it big and sustainable. And now I am passing the microphone to our first speaker. He's online, Denis Sholakov, Vice President, Gazprom Bank. The floor is yours. When we speak about financial markets, my key idea is that they are no natural resources. They are products of our mutual work, and we are no enthusiasts. We are professionals. We do it on a daily basis. And I made this choice 9 years ago when I got back from the UK to Russia, and I fully believed that the local market had to be developed, and the market has all necessary qualities to become a complementary market for the world financial infrastructure and architecture, and the ruble can be a source of borrowing for sovereign borrowers, for corporate financial institutions and countries, trade partners of Russia. And in Russia, it will be possible to boost export of goods and services, and the world will become more stable due to this new market, and currency pair movements will be more predictable. And this is a large-scale cooperation when we take Russia and China, Russia and BRICS, Russia and its closest trade partners. When we speak about cooperation opportunities in the financial markets, we don't invent anything, we are systemically implementing that. You can see bullet point 4 here, what the eyes view, the hands do, as the Russians say. As Anna mentioned, there are good examples. They have been implemented, and some of them took 6 years of work. That's the first bond issue of Belarus that took place 2 years ago, and the second bond issue was sold last year despite the pandemic, and it was implemented successfully, and then Kazakhstan followed suit in the Russian market. So we have 2 sovereigns in the market. Apart from that, we have a list of interested corporates, and Belarusian Eurotorg, Kazakhstan Temirjoli have already placed bonds in the Russian market. Why do we use such infographics? We are trying to draw parallels here. This is the world debt market denominated in US dollars primarily, and whatever happens, all investors fly to the dollar. If there is some volatility, people quit national currencies and fly to the dollar. We've seen that many times. Then, on the other hand, emerging markets are using their own trading venues. And it's not only about the yuan being an alternative market, but the market growth cannot be exponential. We need to understand that. If we look to the right, and that is where Eurozone is, and that is where China is, and the Chinese market has practically caught up with the Eurozone. What is the room for growth? Is it taking the share of the dollar and euro? And that entails complications. There is an element of the complementary approach. The appearance of the market in national currencies and the ruble market is complementary to the world architecture, and there is no confrontation as that. There is a win-win situation, and the local bond market to GDP ratio in Russia and the CIS, if we add the Baltics here, is quite high, and this will allow us to implement this idea. When we say that what the eyes fear, the hands do, we mean that day in and day out, we work in the Russian market to cement and develop it. You see gradual growth of outstanding bonds in the Russian market. That's 23 trillion as of the end of May this year. And look at primary market amounts growth. Despite all complications of 2014, the market was susceptible to those shocks. It got adjusted to that. We adjusted the market to those shocks, and we see the situation in 2019, 18, and 2020. If not look at the OFZ, then the market is still active. It sets new records, and quality-wise, we see changes. As to key things, then, if in the most active segment of the market we see non-residents, and I mean the OFZ segment, this proves confidence in the market and the regulatory framework. If there is confidence in the environment, then the question of a new quality of instruments arises, and that's what we're trying to improve for foreign issuers to be able to enter the market without additional tax burden, and non-residents will be able to enter this market without arbitrage if they invest in Russian corporate bonds. Many moments are being streamlined, but we are systemic in our approach. CIS countries are getting back to the growth trajectory. It wasn't obvious for some people in the beginning of the year, but due to the crisis, the economy shrunk by 3% after a 2.5 growth, but the contraction bottomed out. So we expect the CIS aggregate GDP growth to recover to 3.8% and stabilize there. And we think that conditions are ripe for other countries to follow the example of Belarus and Kazakhstan, and we expect to see Uzbekistan and potentially Azerbaijan in the pipeline. We've been inviting them and talking to them, and we think there are all opportunities here. They can enter this market because there is mutual export and import, and in some cases we see shortfalls there, allowing us to arrange ruble financing for those countries. But then the question arises, why rubles? So the ruble is required preliminary for those countries' export to Russia to be financed in rubles. As this food or fruit-related component is part of the inflation figure in Russia, and the presence of the ruble here would be fully in line with our trade partners' interests, and it would boost trade. When we speak about promising issuers, I mentioned them. Here we see Armenia, and here you can see the trade balance of those countries with Russia, and it could be closed successfully by ruble borrowings. And in each country there are companies, national champions doing business in Russia, and in Russia there are companies actively cooperating and working in those countries and having investment projects there. And ruble borrowings at the sovereign level will set up a risk-free assessment benchmark for ruble-denominated investment projects necessary for Russian companies to take investment decisions. In other words, this instrument has long been required, and it is now used in Kazakhstan and Belarus as an instrument of public administration. And in time, it will become an instrument to assess investment risks. That's what we count on in such deep markets as Uzbekistan and potentially Azerbaijan. Next slide. The Russian market is a live instrument, and it is adapted in the way that we are trying to bring along everything that is present in the world, and we want to have it in the Russian market. And the main aspect of financial market development is responsible financing. It's not only penetrating, but it's integrated and implemented, and it transforms our market. We started low. A year ago, we didn't have standards for green bonds and for social bonds, and now we live in a situation when big deals have already happened. The Moscow government has implemented its projects and issued green bonds, and a number of financial institutions have done the same, like Sovcombank, and we see corporates are following suit with green bonds and social bonds under Russian law. And we haven't mentioned it, but the day before yesterday, one more transaction happened, and it's still being settled, but it's a phenomenal one. Rosatom issued green bonds, and the deal was a huge success. It was many times oversubscribed, and even at the tight end of the range, oversubscription reached 16 billion, with the final amount of the deal reaching 10 billion. The market is really getting mature both for issuers and investors. So all those new trends are implemented, and we are doing that. We have things to offer to our overseas colleagues as well, because this market has the same standard principles as international markets. Practical cases are shown here, and it's not us who should be talking about ourselves, but it should be issuers who did that. But for you to understand that it's all public and it's all crystal clear, you can see nice circles there showing 10 billion and 10 billion for Belarus and 40 billion for Kazakhstan. You see that demand exceeded supply in each case, and you see that it's not something private done by banks to make the market look better. These are full-fledged quality transactions traded in the secondary market. And that's a starting point for today. And today, this deal is in the market. I'm not inventing anything. And a new transaction by Kazakhstan is being pre-marketed and launched today. Next slide. Colleagues, we are optimistic about the market. East or west, home is best. We are all in this market, and we use the ruble. We understand how vast the country is and how undercapitalized the country is. And the market is the key source of socio-economic development for the country and for our closest partners. And the market can be seen as concentric circles. The first step is a blue circle. It's Russia. It's what we do for ourselves day in and day out. It's bond placements such as Rosatom. We did it for ourselves, for our market, to get that necessary confidence. So we need to build that confidence in each other. When we do a green bond, then we need to calculate greenium. These are not simple exercises, but we do things every day. So that this blue circle is the first step. The next concentric circle is Kazakhstan and Belarus. Then we count on seeing our CIS trade partners, then large BRICS partners. Then we can be opportunistic and look at such countries as Egypt, Turkey, where we have cooperation in the field of tourism. 1 million Russian tourists alone go to Africa every year. So let's calculate. Everyone lives there no less than $1,000. That's $1 billion, and it could be financed in the ruble equivalent to set up hotel infrastructure and develop new tourist routes. There is no excessive enthusiasm here. It is all systemic, clear, logical, and well thought out. And the next step is this one, this slide. That's how we see the world. It's not us who made it this way. The disruptive technology of 1960s and 1970s has been constantly improving. The ruble is already fulfilling this function. The world needs this instrument. It's not something artificial. It's based on our relations with trade partners. The currency correlation is quite high. Volumes of trade, investments, and tourism are developing. Direct contracts, including political ones, are in place, so we have all reasons to believe that this regional financial center based on the ruble is being formed at a reasonable pace, and we offer it as an alternative instrument for our partners. We are ready to work on that on a daily basis, so we invite you to have a dialogue with us. If you hear us, come over to us, we'll have you and do successful deals with you. The future belongs to those who see it. Thank you for this opportunity. Have a nice day. Thank you very much for the overview and for starting and setting the tone of this discussion. And on the one hand, I was quite disconcerted by the last slide because there are no circles beyond the Ural Mountains. So do address this question. And I have two more questions. I'll ask the questions right now because you're online with us. So you represent the biggest Russian bank that helped many Russian and not Russian companies raise capital, and you've invested a lot of effort to bring a number of foreign companies to the Russian market. How do you see possible ways to integrate the Russian market with the CIS markets, and what advice do you give to future issuers? And by the way, one of them is now in the panel discussion. On the question of market integration is a question of mutual forward movement. You complained that I didn't have circles beyond the Urals, knowing full well that that's what I've been doing for 8 years. That's building a complex cooperation scheme with China. Our markets are really big and they are coherent in the way that they develop, and they develop gradually following the same trajectory. But it's very difficult to build confidence in each other in these markets because it's an issue of regulatory adjustments when two sovereigns need to issue bonds, or at least one of them needs to do it in the national currency of the other. So this is a project to issue yuan-denominated OFZ bonds. This project is still on the table. We've gone a long way, and in autumn our Chinese partners and I will have an opportunity to have a direct bridge between depositories. We count on that, and this will allow Chinese investors to get to the Russian market, and then we'll get the tool supported not just by a handful of Chinese banks in Moscow, but by national Chinese investors who will be able to take part in a yuan-denominated bond issue in Russia. Then we'll have a direct opportunity to assess Russian risk in the yuan. We'll calculate the difference between the yuan and ruble-denominated bonds and have a direct forward contract for the ruble-yuan currency pair. And that's a highly systemic thing, and I did not include a concentric circle like that in this presentation, but the time will come and it will be implemented as we plan long term. Then, speaking about other countries, to get integrated with the markets, we need to start from small things. We need to pick one or two national champions and give them an opportunity to get into the Russian market, and then we'll look how they will sell their bonds, be it banks or companies. And Kazakhstan immediately got to the Russian market, tested it, and sold their bonds there, and the issue came up quite successful. So there are different ways. Either it's a sovereign paving the way or a national champion doing this, and then the sovereign will follow suit. And apart from Kazakhstan, we will see the same approach via a national champion from our Uzbek colleagues. So let's cross that bridge when we get to it. Denise, thank you very much. We'll carry on working. Any market is linked to regulation, and today infrastructure is something given. It's there, it's working, and foreign issues can get to the market. And 12 years ago, for foreign investors and for foreign issues, entering Russia was a big challenge. European global companies, American companies did not trust Russian infrastructure because there was no central securities depository, and preparing technologies and regulation was challenging for Russia. 12 years ago, foreign issuers could not prepare issue documents because it was not allowed by Russian regulation, and the tax regime changed drastically over the 12 years, and the role of the Bank of Russia is huge in what we have in Russia. And Denise mentioned it, that we have a long way to go, and now I'm passing the mic to Andrei Lipin head of international cooperation, the Bank of Russia, and I would like to pose three questions. What the central bank does for issues and for cross-country agreements for foreign issues to be able to go to our market. And the second question is about investor protection. It's important when foreign issues enter the Russian market, the security is bought not only by Russian investors but by foreign investors as well who need investor protection. And the third question that should not be ignored is ESG. There might be some more ideas. Andrei, the floor is yours. Anna, thank you. For the Bank of Russia, as any regulator, financial market issues are priorities, and that's development of the financial market, the market depth, and participation of residents and non-residents in the market. These are issues we've been dealing with for a long time, and we have quite significant achievements. So, what can be said about our work? If we look at our work as the regulator, then over the past 6 to 7 years, we've gone a long way in terms of non-resident bonds and sovereign bonds and quasi-sovereign bonds in the Russian market. And here we have several factors that yielded this result. After the middle of the 2010s, we started developing bilateral processes, that is the market of information and analysis systems, that's the Eurasian integration in the framework of the Agreement on Information and Analysis Systems, and we have bilateral cooperation. We mentioned successful cases of Belarus and Kazakhstan, and we expect other CIS issuers coming to this market. Denis was very good at drawing circles. Our next biggest partner is China, and then it's about Asia Pacific countries and our European partners, and here we work on bilateral cooperation. And if we look at the benefits of our market, then the Russian market is quite good. If we look at it at different angles, let's look at the infrastructure. In 2016, Bank for International Settlements assigned the highest rating to our market based on the monitoring of legislative initiatives. That's about CPMI IOSCO. And speaking about FATF on money laundering and terrorist financing, and 2019 Russia got the highest rating from the group developing financial measures to combat money laundering. Do you have slides? Yes, sure. Here we go. So that's what we've been doing. That's demand for ruble liquidity. Next slide, please. Let's speak about benefits of our market. If we look at the market, then from the point of view of monetary policy, the rate is 5.5%, and before that we got as low as almost 4%, and we were in a situation many countries faced. After the situation of macroeconomic stability, then the central bank regulates the macroeconomic implications well, and in terms of inflation targets, we get to low levels. Then what happens next? Residents, the population and business realize that rates are low, and they shift to financial markets, and that's the story happening in every country. And we faced that, we expected that, and with the rates going down, we see a lot of demands, and market participants shift towards various financial instruments, and this creates demand in financial instruments, and at the same time it creates demand from our colleagues because the key rate of 5.5% is below the mean rate in the CIS, where it's 8.5 or 7.5%. So our rate is quite attractive for entering the Russian market. You noticed that from the beginning of this year we started publishing our interest rate forecast because it sets the benchmark for market participants. It shows how the money policy will be implemented and what benchmarks can be okay for issues entering this market, and that's an important step from the central bank. It's about transparency in implementing the bank's monetary policy. That's what we started doing. We'll continue doing it. When it comes to issues entering the market, what else is going on? One more important implication that should be paid attention to, that's about our Uzbekistan colleagues. It's not difficult for countries to get to our market. If we speak about sovereign issuers, then participation in such entities as the OECD, FATF, Moneywell simplifies the issuance procedure. If an issuer is not a participant of those organizations, then we can work on that as well. With Uzbekistan, we have a case when we have a separate agreement with Uzbekistan, and they will be able to enter this market based on that agreement. And the same work will be done with Tajikistan and Turkmenistan. We'll set up conditions. And when a sovereign issuer gets into the market, it sets the curve, and it creates opportunities for quasi-sovereign issuers, and then a wider range of investors can get to our market to borrow, and that's quite lucrative. And if to look at that from the macroeconomic point, then the balance of payments and the balance of transactions show that the demand from our partners looks our way, and for demand we need opportunities. Therefore, ruble-denominated sovereign bond issues create opportunities to get liquidity, and then this liquidity can be channeled to trade, and it can be used for balancing bilateral relations. Then the bond market for us is a good option among all other things, because there are issues of swaps, and colleagues get to our market to enter swap agreements, and there are questions of government borrowings, and with all other things being equal, the bond market is the most transparent and well understood market, and it helps build sovereign curves, and it helps set the target for players on our side and on the other side, and for interaction. From the macroeconomic standpoint, we don't see any peculiar risks because the current macroeconomic policy in Russia, and you saw the last address by the chairman, and saying that we shifted to higher yields because we see upside risks worldwide, and the commodity markets are growing and inflation is being imported. And in autumn, if we speak about inflation, in autumn we'll get the highest inflation figure, and then it will go down, and the upward cycle we are in now will end, and we'll get back to the inflation at the notch of 4%, and our rate will get back to the level of what we call a neutral rate. So the rates at the level of 5% will go down. What else can be mentioned? So as to ESG risks, these are trends that are present. It's obvious, and that's a request that is being addressed by the Bank of Russia. We actively work in Russia. We have a big task force in ministries and government bodies to address those risks in terms of forming international taxonomy, and we actively work on defining ESG. The trend is there, but despite that, the final understanding of what ESG is not there, despite European markets going that way. And we can actively participate in defining this ESG regulation that will be shaped up in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. And we're working actively with the market. We've published a number of reports. And here we are actively trying to take into consideration what our issuers need, and that's those who are interested in this story. That's about requirements. I've mentioned that already. One important part is simplifying access to our market, and if we speak about EU markets and CIS markets, then we have additional work with our counterparty in terms of regulation. As to bilateral cooperation, China has been mentioned a lot, and it's important work to secure this cooperation from a regulatory standpoint, and we hope to see yuan-denominated bonds here. We've been working with the regulators on the other side, and that's the work on forming order books, and that's shaping up access for issuers from that market to our market, and our colleagues from the stock exchange are helping us here. And after China is a very big and good story, and we have a lot to brag about here. Then our next Asian Pacific story will be here. We can look at India and Vietnam, and some achievements will be in place really soon. That's the last slide. Thank you. Let's wrap it up here. Andrei, thanks a lot. So I have two conclusions. The first one is that the central bank is ready for openness and transparency and cooperation in Russia and the CIS space, and the central bank is ready to introduce regulatory changes. So that's making regulation acceptable for all the sides, and then there will be just a trickle of investors and securities, but then it will turn into a big stream of investors. Am I correct in understanding you? Regulation is not regulation per se, it follows the market. When we see demand and when we see that the economy is there, then the Bank of Russia starts paying close attention to that as any regulator. And we should not forget about risks, because there is market demand and the market wants to have it simple and fast. And that's an ordinary story. But then it's the regulator's story. We look at the macroeconomic risks and the system in general. And when one issue comes to us, that's not a big story. And if we look at the market, then the overall amount of foreign issues is about 2% of domestic bond issues. So the amount is not big. When we say risk regulation, then we look at this ratio, then the amount of risks is not big. But if we look at the performance, then what will happen in 5 or in 10 years when this story develops, those segments will be springing up. Then we'll look at the risk performance and at the financial stability and at the situation with issuers. So here we need to have a balance. So the regulation should be proportionate, and it should not interfere with the business, but we should understand what happens in 5 years if some additional risks spring up that will later on impact the market. So you are so right. Everybody here likes what you've said, and I have a message to you from the investment community. For any new Russian issuer who is just entering the public market, there are two obstacles. The first obstacle is information disclosure, and the second obstacle is corporate governance. Corporate governance is not that critical in the fixed income market because everybody copes with that, and it's an obstacle for the equity market. And as to information disclosure, it's a challenge for a Russian company, and for a foreign company it's a double challenge. And if the Bank of Russia started regulating that, we would be really glad. I'm not asking you to comment on that, but it's a message to you from the community. Let's move on. In the Moscow Exchange strategy approved in 2019, there's a priority that's making key markets deeper. And there are several bullet points here. Number one is expanding the product range and the list of issuers who are traded. Number two is attracting foreign investors. And number three is developing Russian investors. And I want to pass the microphone to Gleb Shevelenkov, Director of DCM, Moscow Exchange. And how does the Moscow Exchange work to make the Russian market deeper and wider? Thank you, Anna. I wanted to say that you shouldn't stop when talking about the Moscow Exchange because you know it full well. You know the strategy. Yes, that's what I presented. Dear colleagues, thank you very much. Anna moderated our panel yesterday so actively. That's why I got rid of several slides, not to reiterate those ideas. So what is left is what's close to our strategy, and the title is somehow ironic. We are not building an international financial center on the Moscow Exchange. It's rather a projection of our mega project to our infrastructure. And the products of the Moscow Exchange are an opportunity for a Russian investor to reach international markets, and here we do not limit ourselves by the CIS. And the second idea that goes hand in hand with the first one is an opportunity for foreign investors. And there are no limits here. Any foreign investor has an opportunity to enter the Russian market. Over the past 2 years, despite the forced market isolation, including our market, we faced some kind of boom of foreign instruments in the debt market. We took a decision to allow trading in all Eurobonds, at least when it comes to those Eurobonds that have Russian roots. And we are moving in this direction, and by the end of this year, all instruments will be in the infrastructure where we have liquidity. In the equity market, we have 144 American shares, and starting from August last year, the liquidity has been on the rise, and the growth is faster. Our trading amount is in US shares was over 2% of the entire equity segment. Then we have ETFs and Russian-style ETFs. That's an alternative for investors who do not like stock picking. It's for investors who want to buy foreign markets in a packaged way. And then we have the FX market. We have new currency pairs every year, and now it's about the countries members of the CIS space. As to the product offering in the derivatives markets, it's oil and crude oil and Brent and sugar, and it's an opportunity for the Russian audience to participate in the international market performance. As to non-resident share, it's quite moderate. Non-residents are in the OFZ segment. And here we have 16%, that's both primary and the secondary markets, that's participation of non-residents. In the futures and equity markets, the share of non-residents is quite high, and these are non-residents registered in Cyprus who are somehow related to us. In the FX market, the share of non-residents is 18 or rather 19%, and the money market is the repo market and deposit markets. Starting from 2016, we implemented remote access for end investors who want sponsored market access, SMA, and then the infrastructure allows high-frequency trading to be here. We have all points of presence and fiber optic connection and international practices for houses looking for arbitrage opportunities, cross-market arbitrage opportunities. They are here. And our pet topic now is overcoming regulatory constraints that are present in the market, and that's about direct access for foreigners to the market, and that's for clearing services where regulatory licensing is not required. International banks have been working on our platform for a long time. As to bond issues done on the MOEX, and our primary function is creating opportunities for raising debt capital. And I want the 7th icon here. We forgot about Kazakhstan Temirjoli, and the amount there was 15 billion rubles. These are the cases when sovereigns pave the way or corporates pave the way. And then it's the international segment here. The right-hand side indicates 1 week old yields, how bonds were trading, and our instruments and yields here were above the OFZ curve, and any client's demand can be met by an instrument. And as to the population and private individuals, I like it how elegantly Belarus bonds and OFZ alternate each other. Why can't we have a similar instrument from other countries? Unibank is another story. It's not about raising capital, it's about introducing the bond issue to investors. And here in the left hand side, 27% is the amount of secondary trading in Russia, and the rest is on the Armenian stock exchange. So private individuals are trading and the instrument got momentum. The liquidity is not that high, but it's about an opportunity for a Russian investor to buy an instrument via a typical infrastructure of a Russian broker. The Eurobond market. It's the Eurobond market we are talking about, and in the framework of our strategy, we are looking at possible flows in the Russian market, and Eurobonds are placed not on our platform. We are not happy about that, but we want to support the secondary Eurobond market, and our ongoing dialogue with brokers shows that there is cyclic interest from retail investors in this instrument, and you can go to a sales, buy a big chunk at the OTC market and split it and distribute to individual investors, but a bigger option is giving access to an order book when you need to close a Eurobond position when you're an individual investor. So we analyzed regulatory risks and compliance, and we offer Eurobonds in one lot. So that's the liquidity growth in the Eurobond market. So 200 names plus is our plan. I will not be upset if it gets down to 150. bonds. And if you look at, say, bonds information and ask a question, how many euro bonds with Russian roots we have there. So if we speak about some live instruments, it's about 150. And you see private individuals here, 23,000 people. It's not 12 million who registered their accounts, and it's a specific segment. And non-listed Eurobonds are available for qualified investors only. So these are OTC instruments, and this segment is doing well. The share of private individuals in the order book is 40%, and we want to extend the evening session in the bond segment. And in September, we'll have Eurobonds and OFZ in the evening session. We have liquidity here. We have an understanding with market makers. They will provide bilateral quotes, market makers versus private individuals. Our plans are quite modest, but when we look at our colleagues from the equity market, they were modest in their plans as well, and now they are reaching 10%. They are somewhere about 8%. That's the share of the evening session in the day trading. If we get 6% in Eurobonds, it will be good. The client structure is shown here. Non-residents are leaving us, unfortunately, in the OFZ market, and it's not about a lower share, and it was on the rise earlier, and we were happy to show that, but that was wrong in a more comfortable time, because foreign investors in the domestic market is not such a black and white story. We should not depend on international stories in the domestic market, but this last column, 2.9 trillion rubles, is going down as well. That's the data as of April. In the corporate segment, we don't have many non-residents, but we have private individuals, and we're happy about that. It's about bank bonds offered by our big banks, and they are an alternative to deposits. These are plain vanilla bonds and structured bonds, and the Bank of Russia paid close attention to them in terms of the industry being more careful when offering those instruments to private individuals. So we have private individuals in the corporate segment as well. How do we do international work in the EAEU and the CIS? So banks are allowed to get to the FX markets with national licenses. This is our as-is story. We have 4 countries, Belarus, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and Armenia, who have this access. And we talked to our colleagues today, and it's about the corporations, and it's about the FX markets and the money market. These are segments where our colleagues can come to us from neighboring jurisdictions. We have a joint project with the Kazakhstan Stock Exchange, and on July the 7th, we are launching the derivatives market on the Spectra technology in Kazakhstan. Speaking about business lines, we are working with, that's what Denis mentioned today, we are interested in the borrowings in the ruble debt capital market, and we welcome these stories. They do not largely depend on the regulatory framework. And it's not about the Bank of Russia's position. It's about national limitations not allowing issuers to get to the Russian market. National banks are not always liberal about allowing their domestic issuers in the Russian market. And infrastructure-wise, we are looking at links. We are looking at links in the FX market, when our central counterparty and the central counterparty in Kazakhstan are prime brokers. And actually, we are building a synthetic order book where dominant liquidity is in the national market, and the Russian ruble 10G branch is a complementary one. But this synthetic order book allows us to get high liquidity and make this segment more active. Here we have two projects we're participating in. They are quite complex ones and we won't see results this year. It's mutual acceptance of licenses. We want to see direct access to our market for local brokers and banks. So in the FX markets we have banks, and for the securities market we need a license. There is a fear of cannibalization of the client base, but brokers take their clients to a new market, and this broker is a provider of instruments of this market for their clients, and the work is ongoing. We see where it goes, and the same is about access of issuers. Then the case of Uzbekistan, when there was an additional agreement lifting a ban on issuers accessing the market. That's a good case, and it should be looked at closer. We are an advisor in those processes, and we support it and we facilitate it and we add some draft documents, but it's only a mutual effort that regulatory drawbacks can be mitigated, and our infrastructure is ready to implement it and to do it in the markets of neighboring countries. So let's not go beyond the Urals. And Denis drew circles, and it should be the number 8, not circles, because one road, one belt, and number 8 is a magic number in China. And we are almost ready for this story. If you're interested in China, and if you're interested in direct accounting of Chinese investors' rights on yuan denominated OFZ, then I am sure that they will come along. NSD is the driving engine in this process. So Denis Gorikov will be ready to take the questions. So I have two editions. The first edition is about the demand for FX instruments from retail investors. I have banking experience now, and clients of Russian Agricultural Bank are interested in bonds denominated in foreign currencies, and apart from Eurobonds we have bonds by Russian agricultural banks denominated in FX, and settlements can be carried out in rubles, and we see waves of trading. Sometimes retail investors are interested in such products, and apart from Eurobonds there can be bonds with an FX component in the Russian market. And the second part, speaking about the International Financial Center, we are focused on bonds, but there are other products characterizing a country as an international financial center, securing access to foreign products for Russian investors, and I'm speaking about ETFs. For CIS countries we have an ETF on Kazakhstan indexes, the index of the Kazakhstan Stock Exchange, and there are about 15 to 20 ETFs covering markets worldwide, and so Russia secures access to foreign markets for investors, and retail investors can look at the index performance and do execution in the Russian market. Based on those two reports, let's have our conclusions. I guess there are three conclusions. Number one is like that. The Russian bond market is strong and can be used to secure capital for business development and raise capital for it. Russia has built infrastructure which is in line with international exchanges, and that allows foreign issuers to raise capital in Russia. And the third conclusion is like that. Russia has attracted domestic investors to the market. That's a victory, though there is room to grow. And as to defeats, let's talk about them later on. Now let's welcome our new future issuer representing a new jurisdiction, a new country. That's the Republic of Uzbekistan. And I'm passing the microphone to Bahadir Alimov. Please tell us about your expectations from the Russian market and about obstacles that you see. And I hope to see this transaction closed by us this year. And then we'll be able to see one more jurisdiction, one more pricing here, and we'll be able to develop this even further. Bahadir, the floor is yours. Good morning, dear colleagues. I'm here for the first time, and first of all, I would like to describe our vision of the Russian market as an issue, and why are we considering it as a strategically important venue for raising capital in the future. I would like to introduce myself first. I don't know many of you. My name is Bahadir. I am advisor to the chairman of the management board of the National Bank of Uzbekistan for Foreign Economic Affairs. I'm responsible for the bank's investment business, the financial service and capital markets. I managed the first Eurobond issue sold by the National Bank of Uzbekistan at the London Stock Exchange in the amount of 30 million, and now I'm head of a new project. In this slide, I would like to focus on the reasons why the Russian market is attractive for the NBU and Uzbekistan. The Russian corporate bond market has the largest capacity in the CIS and the Baltic space, and it's based on the outstanding domestic bonds amount. This shows that the market infrastructure has been developed quite well and infrastructure risks are quite low. Secondly, in the Russian market, there are successful examples of bonds placed by issuers from Kazakhstan and Belarus, including sovereign issuers. And bond placement results of foreign issuers prove that Russian investors are highly interested in this asset class, and investors in the Russian market are ready to consider bonds by foreign issuers as an instrument to diversify country risk. Thirdly, for issuers, ruble bond issues don't result in high currency risks due to high correlation between the ruble and local currencies compared to hard currencies like US dollar. Number 4 is raising ruble financing will allow us to get more attractive coupon rates compared to local currencies, which is also important for projects that we finance. Apart from general factors, the NBU has additional incentives allowing us to consider the Russian market as a strategically important venue for raising debt financing. Currently, in the framework of boosting trade and economic relations between Uzbekistan and Russia, our clients have the need to finance projects in Russian rubles. Uzbekistan is among leading economic partners of Russia on the CIS space. Russia is number 2 key external trade partner of Uzbekistan. In the framework of St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, we had a number of agreements on delivering machinery and special purpose vehicles from Russia, and that requires ruble financing. Our partners in Russia, banks and us, are trying hard and we're discussing topics such as settlements between countries in national currencies. That's what was discussed on the sidelines of the forum. We're boosting our relationships to convert rubles in sums, and we need liquidity in the Russian ruble. Here, I would like to speak about the NBU. That's a new issue in the Russian market. The National Bank of Uzbekistan for Foreign Economic Activity was set up on the 7th of September 1991 and is the largest commercial bank in Uzbekistan. National Bank of Uzbekistan is not a regulator, it's a universal commercial bank. I'd like to underscore that. Based on the size of its loan portfolio, assets and net profit, the bank is number one in Uzbekistan. It's 100% state-owned. Its key shareholders are the Fund for Reconstruction and Development of Uzbekistan, holding a 58% stake, and the Ministry of Finance, holding a 41% stake. The key focus of the bank is implementing the government policy in the field of international economic activity in order to foster economic cooperation with foreign countries and expand the country's export potential. It's about facilitating international economic activity and providing a wide range of banking services. Starting from 2019, in the framework of economic reforms in Uzbekistan, the bank has been transformed to have a more market-oriented business model. Despite the bank's transformation into a joint stock company, it continues to get a considerable government support, as has always been the case. It is capital injections and long-term soft financing for large strategic projects. The NBU was assigned positive ratings by the 3 rating agencies, and despite the COVID pandemic, the National Bank of Uzbekistan is in very good shape, and you can see that it posts a profit growth of almost 15% vis-à-vis 2019. Today, the bank's market share is 21% by the asset volume, 23% by the size of its loan portfolio, and 15% by deposits, and 23.8% by capital, which is almost 2 times higher than the next biggest bank, that is Uzpromstroy Bank. So I would like to underscore the strategy we developed together with McKinsey to refocus the bank from government projects towards commercial projects. When implementing this 5-year strategy, we plan to boost our return on equity to 22%. And here our main focus is corporate business, retail business, and micro and small business. All those operations and interim targets will allow the bank to grow even more as a commercial bank rather than a state development bank. That's it from me. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Actually, this is the first appearance of the issuer in front of investors, so we got a short presentation of the National Bank of Uzbekistan. I really hope that this deal will be closed this year. Russian Agricultural Bank is in the pool of arrangers, and we are interested in cooperation with this country, not only on the bond market, but in the framework of foreign economic activity. Our clients of Russian Agricultural Bank are really interested in that, so this mutual cooperation will be interesting not only in the financial markets, but in other segments. The central bank stake. This Uzbekistan case is noteworthy. Gleb mentioned the broker-dealer agreement. That's what we do in the EU as the Bank of Russia. That's a two-way road. So when we consider such questions as market access, we assess risks. We consider the situation today in 1, 2, 5 or 10 years, and there is a similar central bank on the other side, looking at their market, assessing infrastructural prospects and risks from our investors coming to their market or their residents coming to our market, And the agreements we get show a certain balance of interests that has been achieved. But this balance of interests can be shifted, and that's what Uzbekistan's case is about. 2 years ago, our Uzbekistan colleagues wouldn't have come to our market because of Manuel and FATF not being around. But we had our agreements, came up with a memorandum, so our colleagues are now able to place a bond issue, and this work can be ongoing. My call is to market participants. On your side, do work with your regulators. We are quite liberal as a regulator, and various options can be found on mutual access and on reasonable liberalization. But these steps should be mutual. And our colleagues from the stock exchange know it well. We are working on a Kazakhstan stock exchange case. We're weighing risks, and by the end of next year, we'll figure out a good model for a link that will be comfortable for us, for the Kazakhstan regulator, and the story will be viable. But again, this is a two-way road. There should be positive interest on our side coming from our participants who approach us asking to do this and that, and there should be the same story on the other side. When it's mutual, we see such good cases. It's a good addition, thank you. A deal gets interesting when two sides are interested in it. If there is mutual interest here, then it will be successful. Chances are it will be. Now we're moving on to one more element of the infrastructure, that's rating agencies. When a foreign issuer gets to the market, that's the Russian market, the role of a rating agency cannot be underestimated. For us, it's an opportunity to get a product line to assess foreign issues in the Russian market. On the other hand, it's a challenge for a rating agency how to assign a rating to a foreign issuer. So I'm passing the mic to Sergey, and the question is like that. How does expert rating agency approach rating foreign issues as you have such ratings? What legal and methodological difficulties do you see? What should both issuers and banks as rating advisors pay attention to when banks bring issuers to you? Sergey, the floor is yours. Anna, thank you very much. Good morning, dear colleagues. It's a pleasure for me to see you here, those who had strength and who was brave enough to come to this event despite heat and COVID. My colleagues showed the market capacity of the Russian market using figures, and they speak for themselves. And I would like to talk about the services and the opportunities of the Russian infrastructure for foreign issues, and I want to dispel widespread myths as to what is possible to do in the Russian market and what cannot be done here. This is a so-called wall showing a barrier that a foreign issuer sees when willing to get into the Russian market. To pass this wall, this barrier, for any foreign company, credit rating on the national scale of the Russian Federation is required. I would like to remind you about the fact that the national rating system was founded in 2014-2015, and it was after the first round of sanctions. And over the past 5 to 7 years, Russia has created a well-developed infrastructure for using national ratings. Now there are about 50 regulatory documents by the Central Bank and the Finance Ministry and the Ministry of Economic Development, where a credit rating on the national scale is required. Some examples why you will need this rating if you're a foreign entity willing to work with Russian counterparts. If you're a foreign bank willing to issue guarantees for state procurement, you need a Russian rating. If you want to sell instruments in the Moscow exchange, you need a Russian rating. And for Russian investors, the presence of a Russian rating is quite an attractive factor. And all in all, it results in lower cost of borrowing. So it's a must, and it's a prerequisite. My colleagues have already mentioned that nowadays borrowing in rubles is lucrative and safe. The chart on the right shows depreciation of the Kazakhstan tenge against the US dollar. And if we look at all national currencies, then it's obvious that depreciation risks against the euro and dollar are considerably higher compared to depreciation risks against the Russian ruble. To manage currency risks, it's more lucrative and safe to borrow in Russian rubles, and economic or rather political sanctions of the EU and the USA against biggest Russian companies also hit companies in the former USSR space working with Russian counterparties. So that's about secondary sanctions. And when you work directly via the Russian ruble, this brings the risks down in your mutual operations. The Russian debt market has a lot of private individuals as investors, and they need instruments to diversify their portfolios and boost returns. And issuers from CIS are liked a lot. And our pioneer, the national champion in the Belarus market, is the Euroopt company. Unfortunately, not all figures are present in this slide, but the idea behind the slide is like that. Having started in 2019, the company has already sold 4 successful bond issues at lower yields in the Russian market. As has already been mentioned, Kazakhstan Temir Joly also issued a ruble bond in the Russian market. Both companies are national champions. And our rating agency assigned ratings on the Russian scales to them, allowing them to get into the Russian market. So that was done by expert rating agency. ESG. No conference on financial markets can be without this topic. You can be skeptical about ESG, or you can be all excited about it, but the fact is like that. This agenda cannot be ignored, and one way or the other, any Russian institution working in the CIS space should take ESG factor into the strategy, and this evaluation will define the structure of financial markets. The Russian market offers an array of instruments that can be placed on the MOEX, and it's not different from the global venues, and the MOEX has set up a special platform where you can sell green social bonds and sustainable development bonds, both with the target use of proceeds on certain projects and linked to general corporate targets of sustainable development. So I want to dispel a myth. So what you can do in the international market can be done in Russia, and the infrastructure of the Moscow exchange can allow you issue instruments for sustainable development purposes the same as in Europe or the US. To get to the MOEX growth sector is easy. All you need is ICMA verification. And we, as a leading rating agency, are certified by the International Capital Market Association, ICMA, and by VEB.RF. Russian rating agencies allow you to get into international database of fixed income instruments targeted at ESG, and if a non-resident company needs some government support and those measures are being developed in Russia now, then this company should be in line with the taxonomy of VEB.RF and the Ministry for Economic Development requirements, and this will be in line with the regulation of ESG in Russia and worldwide. for foreign investors. There is a green light for buying green bonds or social bonds, and that's the presence in the ICMA ESG database. And we are a verifier allowing you to get into this database. We are opening this door for you. Flagship issues have already been mentioned today. Moscow green bonds, Russian Railways green bonds, MTS green bonds, Rosatom green bonds, all those are flagship issuers, and we carried out independent verification, and we as experts are certified by ICMA and VEB.RF. The greenium effect is already there, and Rosatom saved about 30 BP, and it's similar to selling a bond for a general corporate purpose, and that's a promising segment, and it allows you to get financial benefits. I want to dispel one more myth. The services by Russian rating agencies are used only in Russia. It's not so. ESG rating methodologies can be used in any jurisdiction whatsoever. Andrei mentioned it. The central bank is working with market participants, and a national regulation system and ESG rating assignment will spring up soon, and we participate in those processes. As of now, Russian regulation is not in place, and we are in line with all international requirements. You can go to leading international companies and pay 10 times more, but the Russian market offers you the same, and we urge you to use the infrastructure offered by the Russian market and Russian rating agencies. One more important aspect is evaluating ESG risks. It's a tough aspect. It's terra incognita for many companies. They don't know how to address this. There are a lot of international standards on disclosure and on assessment, and if you're a newcomer, it's difficult to understand it all, and we offer professional support and advisory services in this market, and this will save you a certain amount of money. There's a term in international practice that is the ESG acronym soup. There are so many institutions and requirements and taxonomies around, and so you can't get your head or tail around it. And many companies, to bring costs down and not to make mistakes in this market, require professional support, and we provide this support to you. As an example, how ESG ratings can be viewed. Tesla is a good example here. Tesla has ESG ratings from two international providers, Sustainalytics and MSCI, and look at how different approaches are here. For Sustainalytics, Tesla is a high-risk company, and for MSCI, Tesla is a category A company. That's one of the highest rating categories. Why is that? Tesla is a pioneer in electric vehicles, and this facilitates electric transport development, bringing negative environmental impacts down. But at the same time, Tesla deals with the disposal of spent car batteries, which is highly bad for ecology. And then in 2019, Tesla was sued by independent investors for the company buying cobalt, and this cobalt is mined with the help of child labor in the Republic of Congo. That's a debatable topic, and you need professional support to position your company correctly to international and Russian investors. So that's necessary to get correct disclosure of information. We have all those competences. We invite you to cooperate with us. Do contact us, and we'll be able to give you a hand in all steps required to enter the Russian market. Thank you very much. Sergey, thanks a lot. That was great advertising of two things, that's expert rating agency and ESG. At some point I got an impression that we don't have plain vanilla bonds. Everybody issues ESG bonds, and I like this topic a lot. A separate session can be devoted to it. I want to mention greenium once again. I supervised 4 research papers on ESG done by students of Higher School of Economics this year. We studied international experience and its applicability in Russia. So I'll mention one figure. In Europe, a difference in rates and yields can be from 10 BP to 30 BP depending on the bond and the tenor. I think it's a lot for low European rates. In Russia, issuer incentives in this field are clear. It's in fashion, it's in demand, and there are expectations that there will appear an investor pool in Russia interested in this field. And if you are not there, then you don't get certain amount of money. But largely, the infrastructure, incentives, and I would say regulations present in various countries in Europe, the USA, and Asia are not yet available in Russia. Therefore, it's rather a goodwill gesture than real money on the table. So it's important. On the one hand, we understand what premium is offered in other countries and why you need to go there, but we in Russia are not there yet, though yesterday's order book by Rosatom showed that this premium could be secured. So I would ask Sergey one question right now. Why should the National Bank of Uzbekistan, having 3 international ratings, go to a Russian rating agency to get rated to issue bonds in the Russian market? Anna, thank you. As I've already mentioned, the system of national ratings in the Russian Federation was set up to get independent from international ratings. It's in line with federal laws and central banks' regulations. Then our aim is to have one uniform platform, one common denominator to compare credit risks in the Russian market, and the national scale allows retail investors and institutional investors to compare issuers based on this common denominator, that's the Russian national scale. We do not offer substituting one by the other. International ratings and Russian scale ratings are complementary. To enter the Eurobond market, you need the big 3 company ratings. To be successful in the Russian market, you need national scale ratings. Therefore, this event today is devoted to benefits and prospects offered by Russian capital markets. So that's why you need the national rating scale. And the last but not least is that Russian scale ratings are way cheaper compared to international rating agencies. Entering the Russian market with an international rating is possible, but the question is, why do it? Thank you. And now I'm passing the mic to a representative of one more big rating agency, Alexei Mukhin, Managing Director, ICRA, and the questions are the same. What benefits does a rating from a Russian rating agency give a foreign issuer entering the Russian market? What is special about assigning ratings to such issuers in ICRA's case? And one more aspect. You have an office in Kazakhstan, if I know it correctly. Is it necessary to have a branch in a foreign country to provide services to issuers from this country? Or are such branches not required in our digital world in 2021, as many companies are giving up their Moscow offices? Thank you very much for an opportunity to speak here. A lot has been mentioned about the reasons why a national scale credit rating is required. First of all, it's the reform of 2015. It's a reorientation of issues and the market towards ratings on the national scale, as they're not susceptible to sanctions risks. As an agency, we work on the national scale as well. But I'd like to underscore that our approach to assessing foreign issuers is built on our international rating scale. We have a national rating scale for Russia, and we have an international rating scale comparable to the approach of international rating agencies. If we take an idealized default probability table, that's a comparison of default probability for countries and companies worldwide, then the Russian scale is a kind of sub-universe kept by the country ceiling for default probability. Therefore, the approach to rating foreign entities is like that. We assign an international scale rating first, then we can compare companies worldwide, and then we use the mapping methodology to assign those companies a national scale rating for Russia if necessary. As an agency, we can assign a rating to any company. We have methodologies for non-financial companies and for banks, and we need two things for that. That's a sovereign rating of a jurisdiction where the company is from, and then we need enough information such as disclosed information, reports, and other data. There was a parallel drawn. A sovereign starts and then companies follow suit in the market. And in rating, the situation is the same. We assign a credit rating to a sovereign first, and then we can assign ratings to companies from this jurisdiction. We have a separate team of sovereign analysts, macroeconomics specialists. They are talking to central banks and finance ministries in these countries. If my memory doesn't fail me, we have about 17 credit ratings and assessments, sovereign, non-public ratings and assessments. So we can work in 17 countries now, and we want to continue working actively in the CIS space. As to public ratings, we have Belarus and Kazakhstan. We've rated them, and then we are actively working in other areas. Russian regulation has been developing in an interesting way. In 2015, the focus was shifted towards national scale ratings, and currently the professional community dealing with the rating business and the expert board at the Bank of Russia are holding consultations on applicability of the national scale for evaluating and comparing foreign issues. We use the national scale so far, but in the future we might see some shifts towards rating foreign issues on the international scale. And these international scales should be accepted in regulation and in wide regulatory framework. And it currently counts about 70 regulatory documents, and we as an agency are present in all of them. As to our principles of assigning international scale ratings, I've already mentioned them. That's a unified approach. And for rating companies in different jurisdictions, and they can be within one rating scale. Compatibility is secured here, and we did a lot here, having analyzed thousands and tens of thousands of companies with financial reports to validate the methodology for assessments to be compatible. And risks and peculiarities of the jurisdiction were taken into account. If we speak about the corporate methodology, then we take into account sectoral peculiarities for every issuer, and we have about 12 sectoral applications. These are separate guidelines taking into account peculiarities of this or that issuer, and the sector they represent. So 17 sovereign credit ratings and non-public assessments. We have a public rating for Kazakhstan and Belarus. All in all, we have 27 credit ratings of foreign companies and supranational institutions, and 6 supranational institutions have credit ratings on the international and the national scales. We have 12 sectoral applications for the corporate methodology, covering 90% of the most promising segments. Sometimes when we speak about issuers getting to the Russian market and then a national scale rating is required, we have the mapping methodology for comparison. It's a set of tables. We take Russian Federation as a starting point, and then we use tables for comparison. We see where the starting point is. We know where the level of the company in the international scale is. Then we come up with an assessment of the national scale rating for Russia. Can the country ceiling be breached when a jurisdiction has low credit ratings? Yes, this can be done. When there is external support, when a company is part of a group of companies where a basic jurisdiction is a country with a higher rating, then this support will be taken into account and it will impact the rated entity. Then diversification of the company business is taken into account when operations are not related to the country of jurisdiction. So approaches are quite flexible when rating bonds. Whether there is an SPV or it's a direct bond issue, and it's rating bonds with having a guarantee or a guarantor. We don't assess the issuer directly. In this case, we assess the guarantor on those bond issues. A question arises: what is the best way to issue bonds via an SPV or without an SPV? For a rating agency, it makes no difference. When there are necessary documents in place, the level of rating will be the same when there's an SPV used to issue bonds or there's no SPV. But if we take the process of tapping the market into account, and when we look at further servicing of a bond issue, then when there is an SPV, it makes the process simple, because there are a lot of logistics implications impacting the complexity. If it's a direct issue, the complications are related to enhanced qualified electronic signature keys and information disclosure, so that's not a trivial process. I cannot avoid the ESG topic today. It's a buzzword nowadays, and I think that we talk about it more than it's necessary. The feeling is that all other spheres have vanished and it's the only topic that's around. There's a saying in a well-known film: there will be no theater and cinema, just the television, and it's just ESG nowadays. Do people understand what ESG is? Do they understand what they want from this topic? Here there are questions, and we came up with a pyramid for ourselves. That's a pyramid of complex solutions for ESG services we provide as a group of companies. When we speak about an ESG assessment and verifications for green and social bonds, it's the top of the pyramid. The company should be mature and the processes should be mature in the company. There should be policies and documents in place, and the company should account for those risks, and they should be embedded in all the company processes. Strategically, we understand that in the coming years, what will be interesting is facilitating ESG transformation of companies, and we are ready for that. We are offering a range of services here. We don't do it on our own. We cannot be a specialist in all areas, and it's not necessary. We have partnership agreements with companies calculating carbon footprint, companies specializing in some assessments of ecological and climate risks. In our ago, we signed an agreement. I can announce it now. We are now partners with Carbon Lab, and that's the company that's competent in calculating carbon footprint in Russia. Their reports are acceptable in the European market because they are certified to do it. They know how to calculate that because not many people understand what Scope 1 and Scope 2 is when it comes to calculating the carbon footprint. We provide a full range of services on verification, on compliance with VEB.RF taxonomy, that's the Russian taxonomy, and ICMA taxonomy. We've made a number of verifications and we have a big pipeline here. We're a part of verifiers of the MOEX, and we are partners with the AIFC Green Finance Center. We have five people in the company dealing with ESG only, so that's the team. So we recruit unique people, and it's our key asset in this field. Now a couple of words about our ESG evaluation. That's based on comparative analysis, and we compare companies in one industry. We don't compare metallurgy and retail, but we use one and the same scale at the same time. There's one more question here. There is no frame of reference for evaluating ESG risks. There is no definition of an ESG default, and there is no single scale to assess ESG risks. And Tesla is a good example here. And in the framework of task groups at the central bank where we participate, all those questions should be addressed in the coming years, or this will be developed further. Things that should be done right now, ESG verification and assessment is what should be done right now. ESG evaluation is not universal, but it shows weak points for the company where there is room for improvement. That's it from me. And as to the branch in Kazakhstan, an office in Kazakhstan is a big deal, because in Kazakhstan we have analysts specializing in that market, and it's our hub to penetrate the ex-Soviet Central Asia and South Caucasus republics, and that's our way to develop in this area. So we rated Kazakhstan companies Samruk Kazina, Kazakhstan Housing Company, and Kazakhstan Food Contract Corporation, and we have an active pipeline in Kazakhstan. We understand regional peculiarities and macroeconomic implications in Kazakhstan and neighboring countries. It's all required. Therefore, head of our office in Kazakhstan will be speaking tomorrow, and we'll talk about ESG. Does expert rating agency need regional offices to assign ratings for CIS issuers? An office in Kazakhstan or elsewhere is not our purpose. We had an office in Kazakhstan and we got rid of it because it's easier for us to manage our development from Moscow. We work with companies and banks from Belarus, Kazakhstan. We have a big pipeline in Uzbekistan. I don't see problems here, but any company should choose their own ways to develop. So that's it. Thank you. It's good that both models are viable, and I have 3 comments. The first idea is whether to use SPV or issue guaranteed bonds. I hope to listen to some information about that in the panel discussion on the Russian bond market, because it's an important topic. When we approach this topic, it's getting clearer when the Russian rating from a Russian rating agency is required and when it's just something desirable. So I want speakers from that panel to highlight that's my request. The second important question is like that. Two rating agencies told us that now they are ready to assign ratings to any issuer from the CIS or the Baltic space, and if there is one more country where they are not ready to assign ratings, then based on their experience it won't be a problem, as was the case 5 years ago. Then the third idea is like that. All speakers are focused on ESG, so we should be waiting for ESG bonds from the CIS. Let's move on. And now we have a representative of Eurasian Development Bank, Nazira Sabbekova. She is head of funding, and I would like to pass the microphone to her. We didn't choose this bank by chance. The bank is the driver of project finance, and it's a kind of development institution, and it plays an important role in international processes. Their investment portfolio is over 4 billion, and they are implementing 83 projects in 6 countries. The bank is an issuer itself. It works in Russia and in Kazakhstan, so their approach to International Financial Center and the International Financial Center in Russia can be both complex and unconventional. The questions are like that. How do you assess the current results in building an international financial center in Russia? What else can you tell us regarding growth areas for Russia in terms of regulation and infrastructure, taking into account your vast experience in cooperating with other infrastructure organizations outside Russia? And then a question about the bank. What projects are you going to focus on, and are there EDB bond issues in the pipeline? Anna, thank you very much. It's great that I am the last speaker on this panel discussion, because I listened very carefully to the opinion of the regulator and the trading venue and representatives of rating agencies, and I listened to plans of the new issuer eyeing the Russian market as a potential opportunity for themselves. And on our side, we want to share the information on what's been done by us. The current market conditions and the Russian market knows us well. We are well represented in the Russian Federation and in Kazakhstan, and we are looking at the Armenian market now. We follow our projects and our clients. Russia and Kazakhstan are the bank shareholders, and they are the main driving forces, and a large chunk of projects financed by the bank are big infrastructure projects in Eurasian Economic Union countries, and we have a lot of knowledge and experience. As to the development of the International Financial Center in Moscow, it's gratifying because we started our activity in 2009. We started entering the Russian market then as an issuer and a supranational organization. We faced a number of procedural constraints, and up to now we've been encountering them. We tackle this issue, and we are in talks with the Bank of Russia and the Moscow Exchange, and we are doing it on a regular basis. We inform them about problems that we are facing as an international entity, and we are a non-resident issuer. Therefore, we face regulatory constraints, and to lift them, we are in constant negotiations. And this discussion yields results, and there are decisions taken by the regulator and the stock exchange and other non-resident issuers are entering the Russian markets based on those achievements. Not only IFOs but sovereigns do this. The ECB task is not to enter the market and absorb the ruble and tenge liquidity. We are about developing financial markets. Therefore, we participate in bond issues for EAEU issuers, and we are ready to support such bonds. And we are not only an issuer, but we can be a key investor as well. Development of an international financial center in Moscow is quite gratifying, and non-residents can buy corporate and non-corporate securities, and I see good good demand from retail investors, and retail investors are buying our bonds, and we believe that the more EAEU bonds are in the market, the more information there is here about EAEU countries and promising issues from this area. And those bond issues will set up additional conditions for the local market. And there will be more investment opportunities for Russian investors. We want to see more and more opportunities for non-resident investors, and they can come to the market as well. We can attract non-resident investors in EAEU countries, and that's not only about ruble investments, but it's about foreign currencies as well. I know that Kazakhstan investors actively buy issues from the Russian Federation, but so far Russian issuers, when looking at international markets, they resort to the euro, which is strange. But in Kazakhstan we have Astana International Financial Center. There are difficulties related to logistics issues, but you can go there. You can have a double listing there, and that's a way to absorb local demand in Kazakhstan. When it comes to rating agencies, then we are one of the first non-resident issuers that got a rating from ACRA on the national scale, and it was initiated by us. It was a lot of work, and we looked forward to get the methodology to assess non-resident issues on the national scale. And it's good that we have proper tools here, and there is an approach, and there are analysts who know how to do it. And so ECB has the national scale rating from ACRA, and our sovereigns have an opportunity to get ratings there as well. Kazakhstan was one of the first to get that rating. And if we see more sovereign issues rated by a national rating agency, this will be a tremendous move forward. A lot has been said today about a good ruble-tenge correlation, and it's about integration of national currencies, and ECB is taking steps in this direction. We are ready to support this infrastructure. It's here, and we are ready to support settlements and clearing services on the ECB platform. As the Eurasian Development Bank has direct access to settlement and clearing systems of all EAEU countries. As to the problems I would like to highlight today, a lot has been said about regulatory opportunities and simplification of procedures and rating opportunities, but the problem is the market. As an issuer, the market is really volatile as it reacts to external implications. We know what they are. And I would like to pay the regulators' attention to this aspect. How can investors be protected and how can the market be protected? It's the market conditions, and the market should react to externalities. But on the other hand, this is somehow a constraint for potential non-resident issuers willing to enter the Russian market. There are many more factors out there, such as reserve requirements when buying non-resident bond issues. And one way or the other, they impact the pricing. So far, we don't have yield curves for Kazakhstan issues or for Belarus and its issues, and that's not the inception stage for the market, but it's the second or the third stage of the market development. And I want all market participants to interact and talk to each other. What I see is that investors not always understand who wants to get to the market. There is no dialogue and talks between potential investors and issuers. And what helps here to close this gap is the work of Russian arrangers, Russian banks, and we are really grateful to them for that. And to wrap it up, I'd like to say that EDB is ready to support EAEU issues, both sovereign and corporate and financial institutions, and that's our mandate as a bank. Then we are talking to ACRA in terms of getting some subsidized support for future issues from EU countries, and there are many more factors we're paying attention to and we'd like to develop them. When it comes to this topic of ESG, we are an IFO, it's our topic, we have a pipeline and we have projects. And if we do something interesting in the market in the coming time, then this will give additional boost to this ESG topic. The Chinese market is interesting, and we got consent from the People's Bank of China to enter the Chinese market last year, and if EDB does transactions in mainland China, then this will somehow incentivize and develop this segment. Nazira, thank you very much. And now I have two questions to all the speakers. Gleb, you're the first. Have we managed to build an international financial center in Russia? What worked out and what wasn't successful? And what should we work at? But before that, let's get back to the NOW4 report on the ideal securities market model. The first report was prepared in 2008, and recently new material was disclosed describing development of the Russian market up to 2030. In 2008, the forecast was to have a twice bigger market than today, both in terms of its size and debt to GDP ratio. The target on attracting retail investors to the Russian market has been exceeded. But there is a fly in the ointment here. The matter is that many private individual accounts are not funded today. And the infrastructure has been built. Perfection knows no limits, and the building itself is here and it has many flaws, so issuers should be okay with that. What hasn't been done? And the Now4 report is the source that I'm using. The figures are from this report. What we didn't manage to do well is develop the segment of domestic institutional investors and mutual funds. The amount of money there is a way smaller than the amounts on brokerage accounts. A way smaller is about 6 times smaller. What we didn't manage to do well is develop the segment of institutional investors, namely pension funds. There is a lot of money in this segment, 4.7 trillion rubles, and the money is primarily invested in bonds and deposits. It doesn't not facilitate the IPO and SPO market development in Russia. And there are a number of regulatory constraints and reputational problems. That's a quote from the Now4 report. Over the last 2 years, the IPO market in Russia posted positive growth, but if we compare this market with 2007, not to mention dreams from the 2008 report, then this market looks quite modest. The market capitalization in 2020 compared to 2007 is 52% in US dollars. Stock trading is at the level of 40%. IPO amounts reach just 2%. Capitalization as a percent of GDP in 2020 vis-à-vis 2007 is 49%. Stock trading to GDP is 69%. And IPO to GDP is 3.5%. That's where we are now. And I want our distinguished speakers to tell us what to do and how to develop further. Gleb, that was your question and your reply. So we built and finished building. That's not what I want to say. The most disheartening aspect here is the use of the word international. We see that the international character of the Russian capital market has been subsiding year on year, and that's not about non-CIS states, but we are facing stagnation with our closest neighbors. We are optimists, we don't give up, so we need to keep on being optimists and trying to improve our integration and our connection and dialogues. And Denis Shulakov is a bright example here. If he, with all his energy, couldn't kickstart yuan-denominated OFZ, so a lot of work is there. So we haven't built it. We need to build it. Infrastructure-wise, it's ready. When we have cases, then regulation will be developed. Here I agree with Andrei. If invest bankers and DCM guys don't attract issues from neighboring jurisdictions, then where will we get the right agreement between regulators? So it's up to us. Let's do it. Sergey. All trends are forward-moving. The market is moving in the right direction, but we see a big problem at the level of economic and political integration in the framework of the common economic space. Regulators are not really good at coming to agreements with each other, and this has already been mentioned. National banks and finance ministries are somehow jealous of their issuers and investors flowing to the Russian market. Unfortunately, the problem is there, and how it will be resolved politically and when, it's not clear, but I will join optimists. I will join Gleb and Denis, and I'll support positive trends that are out there in the market. We, as a representative of infrastructure, we are ready to work with foreign issues. Andrei, it's tough. Speaking about an IFC, what is that? It's a service. There is demand and supply here. So in terms of supply, structurally, it's all good. So what we do, what our colleagues do, will be developed further. So the situation will be fine. And in terms of regulation, then there will always be question to the regulators. When we rent a car somewhere, we want insurance. If you get into a car crash, you don't want to pay for the consequences. And regulators approach it in the same way. Regulation is something that is not necessary. The business might think like that. So it's tough regulation risks and something else, but it's about the balance of interests. And it all depends on cases. If there is demand, then a solution can be found, and it can be done really quickly when there is sense in it. So here we are open in terms of reasonable regulation and balancing interests, but that's the supply side. The other side is demand, and it's outside the scope of the regulator, the Bank of Russia, and it's about macroeconomic and implications and geopolitical risks. Bahadir, what's your comment? The International Financial Center in Russia is good because nowadays we see sanctions and we see the situation with China. And in the framework of One Belt, One Road program, we do settlements in national currencies, and Uzbekistan counts on having an international financial center in Russia, and it's positive work. Alexei, I will join cautious optimists. We have a topic to discuss, that's the CIS bond market congress without the Baltic states, but still we're talking about the CIS. So it's an international level of our financial center in Russia. And there are problems related to the ruble and its status as a reserve currency. The share of the ruble in international settlements is going up, but it's not happening as fast as many people would like to see it. And further strengthening of the ruble in this role will support the International Financial Center in Russia. Nazira, do you have any additions? You might be glad to hear that the Eurasian Economic Commission has a task force on developing EU financial markets, and the questions discussed there. And EDB is part of this task force, and the questions on the agenda are not directed to development of financial markets to the extent we want them to be. And we'd like to initiate this discussion, and we want to approach the Eurasian Economic Commission, or we should act at the level of associations or initiatives from market participants. Thank you. My take is this one. Gleb mentioned he was an optimist, but I am a pessimist, but there is a different reason for that. An international financial center in Russia has largely been built, though not all has been implemented. I don't want to say that not having reached the desired result, we pretended that what we reached was exactly what we desired. It's the other way around. What has been done has already been mentioned. What else should we do? We need to incentivize retail investors more, as they should understand the market, be more responsible and accept risks. We need to fix an imbalance between the amount of money in collective investments, mutual funds, in individual trust management, and the amount of retail investors' money on brokerage accounts. The pension market should be developed as well, as in other countries it's a lot of money involved in the financial market, and this amount secures pensions for private individuals and supports capital markets. And all states don't allow a big number of their retail and institutional investors to have direct access to markets in other countries. We can see it in Europe and the US. There are always limitations. This decision to access the market should be a conscious one. That's the direction we should be going in. And developing the IPO and SPO market with attracting foreign investors to Russia is important. If we work on these 5 aspects, we'll have enough work for the next decades. So let's wrap it up without questions.